Pack your desk, Wade. We'll handle the clients ourselves. That's what Ashley Whitfield told me at 5:07 p.m. on a Thursday. The CEO's daughter, all of 29 years old, standing there in her designer heels like she'd just solved world hunger. By 8:17 a.m. Friday morning, our $290 million client's lawyer was emailing the board, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Wade Morrison, 49 years old, and I'd been keeping this company's infrastructure accounts running smooth for 11 years. Navy taught me systems. Corporate America taught me people who mess with those systems. So let me back up and tell you how this whole thing went down. It started Monday morning. I'm at my desk, second cup of coffee, when my phone rings. Federal contractor, panicking about some soil reports from 2009. Routine stuff for me, but for them, it's like the world's ending. Wade, can you explain why they're asking about this now? I could. I always could. That's what I'd been doing for over a decade, fixing other people's problems before they became everyone's problems. This $290 million contract with Lander and Holt Energy wasn't just big money, it was complex stuff. Interstate power grids, federal oversight, EPA compliance, DOE regulations, the kind of work that keeps the lights on across 3 states. Most people see a contract that size and think it runs itself. Trust me, it doesn't. It needs someone who understands the technical side, the legal side, and how to keep federal lawyers happy. That someone was me. I fixed the soil report issue in about 20 minutes. Found the documentation they needed, explained the regulatory timeline, sent them the right forms. Just another Monday, but Ashley had been watching. She'd been doing a lot of watching lately. See, Ashley Whitfield is CEO Bryce Whitfield's daughter. Got promoted to EVP of strategy a few months back, which basically meant she had an office and opinions but no real idea how anything actually worked. Her last strategic initiative was posting inspirational quotes over pictures of wind turbines on our company Instagram. I tried to stay out of her way. I'd survived 5 different leadership changes, a merger, 2 budget freezes, and 1 CFO who thought golf metaphors were the secret to quarterly projections. I figured I could outlast 1 more executive who didn't know the difference between renewable energy certificates and renewable energy credits. But Ashley had other plans. Wednesday afternoon, she cornered me by the coffee machine. Wade, we should really talk about modernizing your role. I knew what that meant. In corporate speak, modernize usually means eliminate, but I played along. What did you have in mind? Well, you do a lot of hands-on technical communication. What if we streamline that, maybe some automated systems, AI chatbots? I almost laughed. This woman wanted to replace federal contractor relationships with chatbots. Our main client contact, Nain Carson, was a lawyer who once threatened to sue us over a PowerPoint formatting error. She wasn't going to chat with a bot about nuclear compliance requirements, but I just nodded and said, interesting idea. The thing is, Ashley had been trying to get involved with my accounts for months. The first time she sat in on a Lander and Holt call, she asked if the power plants came with renewable energy certificates as add-on features. I watched Nain's face freeze over the video call. Professional woman, but you could see her thinking. Are you seriously asking if nuclear power plants have bonus features? That call got rescheduled. I smoothed things over, like always. By Thursday, I figured Ashley would lose interest and move on to some other optimization project. I was wrong. Thursday afternoon, my calendar pinged, meeting 5 p.m., HR room 4B, no details, no agenda, just a time and place. That's when you know you're in trouble. When they don't tell you what the meeting's about, it's because you're not going to like it. I grabbed my project folder and headed down the hallway. Patricia Moore from HR was already there, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Ashley was sitting at the conference table like she was about to give a performance review to the president. Wade, thanks for coming on such short notice. I sat down and waited. Sometimes it's better to let people talk first. This isn't easy, Ashley started, but after reviewing our departmental efficiencies, we've decided your role doesn't align with our new strategic direction. There it was, 11 years, and it came down to departmental efficiencies. We'll be consolidating technical oversight to create a more agile structure, she continued. We appreciate everything you've done, but we're handling client relationships directly now. I looked at Patricia. She was staring at the table like it might open up and swallow her. You're firing me, I said. It's not personal. It's just business optimization. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Severance package, probably with some non-disclosure agreement stapled to it. We're giving you until end of day to pack up. The clock said 5:07 p.m., real generous with the timing. I opened the envelope, glanced at the paperwork, then slid it right back. No questions, I said. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked out. No arguments, no begging, no dramatic speeches. Ashley probably expected me to make a scene. That's what they always expect, some emotional breakdown that makes them feel better about their decision. But here's the thing about being in the Navy, then working corporate for 11 years. You learn when to fight and when to plan, and I had a plan. I walked back to my desk and did something that probably saved my career. I didn't delete anything, didn't send any angry emails, didn't badmouth Ashley to the other guys. I just sat down and opened one folder, client contracts, active and renewals. See, here's what Ashley didn't know about me. The Navy teaches you to document everything, and 11 years in corporate taught me to document it twice. I had backup copies of every contract, every amendment, every email that mattered. I pulled out my portable drive and copied one specific file. Not because I was planning revenge, because it was protocol. When you're dealing with federal contracts worth $290 million, you better have your paperwork in order. The file I copied, Amendment 9C to Contract 3B 290. Boring legal stuff that most people never read. But I read everything, especially when my name's on it. I packed up my personal stuff. Photo of my dad, couple of technical manuals, my good pen. Left the company coffee mug, left the staplers, left all the junk they could keep. Then I walked out. Ashley was in the hallway, laughing with someone from accounting about weekend plans. Didn't even look my way. Perfect. Outside, I sat in my truck for a minute. Not because I was emotional about it. I just needed to think through the next steps. That's how you handle a crisis. You don't react, you respond. First stop was Morrison's Cafe downtown. Good coffee, reliable Wi-Fi, and quiet enough to work. I ordered a double espresso and opened my laptop. Now here's where it gets interesting. Remember that Amendment 9C I mentioned? Let me tell you about that little piece of paper. 6 months ago, we had a compliance audit that nearly killed the Lander and Holt contract. Federal regulators crawling all over our procedures, asking questions about everything from environmental impact to personnel security clearances. Big mess that could have cost us everything. During that audit, Nan Carson, that's Lander and Holt's general counsel, pulled me aside. Smart woman, been dealing with federal contracts longer than I've been alive. Wade, she said, we can't afford another personnel shuffle. Every time you guys change account managers, we have to restart the clearance process, retrain people, rebuild relationships. It costs us months. Made sense. Federal work isn't like selling widgets. You need security clearances. You need to understand the regulations. You need relationships with the right people. You can't just hand that off to whoever's available. So Nan suggested we put it in writing. Not just that I was the account manager, but that I was the mandatory technical liaison, meaning they specifically requested me by name to handle their account. Put it in the contract, she said. Make it official. So we did. Amendment 9C, Section 14C, simple language. In the event that the assigned technical liaison, Mr. Wade Morrison, is terminated, transferred, or removed from active participation in project oversight without written consent from Lander and Holt Energy, said removal shall be considered material breach of contract. Guess who signed off on that amendment? Ashley Whitfield, EVP of Strategy. She probably thought it was just routine paperwork. Never bothered to read what she was signing, but I read it, and Nan's people definitely read it. So there I was, sitting in the cafe, looking at this contract clause that Ashley had just violated. Not my fault, she didn't do her homework. I drafted an email. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just facts. Subject: Continuity Clause violation, Lander and Holt Contract 3B 290 per attached executed amendment dated April 4th. I'm formally flagging a potential compliance breach related to service continuity for Lander and Holt Energy. Please confirm receipt. Attachments: Contract 3B 290, PDF Amendment 9C Service. Liaison Continuity, PDF. I sent copies to internal legal, external compliance, and the usual bureaucrats. Then I added one more address to the BCC line. Nan Carson at Lander and Holt. Click. Send. The email disappeared into cyberspace. I finished my coffee and drove home. But let me tell you what was happening back at the office while I was having my peaceful evening. Friday morning, 8:17 a.m. CEO Bryce Whitfield is probably on his second coffee, checking emails before his first meeting. Then he sees something that makes his blood pressure spike. Subject: Service Termination Notice, Contract 3B 290 from Nan Carson, and it's not a friendly message. This correspondence confirms receipt of documentation suggesting breach of our service continuity agreement under Contract 3B 290. Termination of Mr. Wade Morrison without prior client consultation constitutes violation of Clause 14C. Per Section 6, this may be grounds for immediate contract reevaluation and default termination with cause. Please advise. Short, sweet, and absolutely terrifying if you're a CEO looking at a $290 million contract walking out the door. Now, I wasn't there to see Bryce's face when he read that email, but I can imagine. Guy who's been running companies for 30 years, suddenly realizing his daughter just stepped on a landmine he didn't even know was there. The first thing he probably did was walk over to Ashley's office. She's sitting there probably checking her Instagram, thinking she just pulled off some brilliant strategic move. "Tell me you didn't terminate his active contract," Bryce says. Ashley looks confused. What contract? That's when he shows her the email from Nain, and probably watches the color drain out of his daughter's face as she realizes what she's done. See, Ashley thought she was firing just another employee. What she actually did was breach a federal contract that specifically named me as mandatory personnel. The client didn't just want someone to do my job. They wanted me to do my job, and when you violate a federal contract, things happen fast. Legal teams start making phone calls. Procurement officers start reviewing vendor agreements. People in suits start asking uncomfortable questions about your company's reliability. By Friday afternoon, every executive at that company knew my name, not because I was an employee anymore, because I was the guy they couldn't afford to lose and they'd just lost me. But here's the thing, I wasn't lost. I was just getting started. While I was having a nice quiet weekend, things were falling apart at the office, and I mean really falling apart. Monday morning, 7:12 a.m., the executives are probably still trying to figure out how to fix this mess when another email hits their inboxes. This one's even shorter than the first. "We will now be working through Mr. Wade Morrison's independent consultancy for all technical oversight requirements. He understands our specifications. All future correspondence should be directed to his firm." That's it. No threats, no legal language, no "we're disappointed in your company." Just a simple business decision from Lander and Holt's general counsel. See, over the weekend I'd made a few phone calls. Called up Dana Reeves, a lawyer I know who specializes in federal contract consulting. Smart woman, used to work with Nain Carson before she went into private practice. "Wade," she said, "when I explained the situation, you just handed them the cleanest exit strategy in corporate history. They don't have to sue. They don't have to fight. They just transfer the contract to you directly. Is that legal? Completely. Federal contracts allow for subcontractor arrangements, especially when the client specifically requests certain personnel. And since you're named in the continuity clause, you're not just allowed to take this work, you're required to." So while Ashley was probably thinking she could smooth things over with some PowerPoint presentation about enhanced service delivery, the client was already moving on. Not with the company, with me. I spent Sunday afternoon setting up Morrison Technical Consulting LLC, filed the paperwork online, got my federal contractor registration updated, opened a business bank account. Took about 4 hours total. By Monday morning, I had a company. By Tuesday, I had a client. But let me tell you what was happening in those executive meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Picture this, conference room full of suits, everyone looking at spreadsheets that show $290 million walking out the door. The CFO is probably running numbers on how long they can survive without their biggest contract. Legal is explaining why they can't sue their former employee for following the contract terms. And Ashley is sitting there realizing she just made the most expensive mistake in company history. Bryce Whitfield isn't screaming, because CEOs don't usually scream in board meetings, but he's doing that thing where he talks very quietly, which is somehow worse. Let me understand this correctly. He's probably saying, "We fired the one person specifically named as mandatory personnel in our largest contract. We did this without consulting the client, and now they're working directly with him instead of us. It was a strategic restructuring," Ashley tries to explain. "It was a $250 million mistake." Someone else says, "Meanwhile, I'm at my kitchen table working on my laptop in sweatpants, and my phone starts ringing." First call is from Ashley herself. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi Wade, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. We're working through some procedural issues and it would be really helpful if we could reconnect for continuity purposes. Give me a call when you can. Translation, please come back so I don't get fired." Second call, an hour later, little more desperate this time. "Wade, we really need to talk. There's been some confusion about the contract terms. I think we can work something out that benefits everyone." Translation, "Holy crap, I'm in serious trouble." Third call is from Bryce Whitfield himself. Now that gets my attention. "Wade, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your departure. I'd like to discuss bringing you back in a consulting capacity to help with the transition." Translation, "Name your price." But here's the thing, I didn't answer any of those calls. Not because I was mad, but because I was busy. Turns out when you're the only person authorized to handle a $290 million federal contract, your phone rings a lot. Lander and Holt had 6 months of backed up technical issues that nobody at my old company could handle, environmental assessments that needed my signature, regulatory submissions that required my security clearance, vendor certifications that I'd personally validated. Remember how Ashley wanted to streamline my role with automated systems? Well, automation doesn't have security clearance. AI chatbots can't sign federal compliance documents, and you definitely can't outsource relationships with nuclear regulatory officials to some kid with an MBA. So while my former colleagues were having emergency meetings about how to save their biggest contract, I was actually doing the work. From my kitchen table, in comfortable clothes, at rates I set myself, and those rates, let's just say consulting fees, are higher than employee salaries. Lot higher. The beautiful part was how clean it all was. No lawsuits, no drama, no he said, she said nonsense. Just a client choosing to work with the person they actually wanted instead of the company that employed that person. Ashley probably spent weeks trying to figure out how to undo what she'd done. But you can't unfire someone when the client has already moved on. You can't force a federal contractor to work with people they don't trust. And you definitely can't negotiate your way back into a relationship after you've violated the terms that made the relationship possible. The other thing Ashley probably didn't think about was what happens to a company when its biggest client walks away. Not just the immediate revenue loss, but the ripple effects. Other clients start asking questions. If Lander & Holt doesn't trust you with their work, why should we trust you with ours? Word gets around in the federal contracting world, especially when it's word about a company that fires the people their clients specifically requested. That's not just bad business, it's a reliability problem. So while I'm building my new consulting practice, my old company is trying to explain to their remaining clients why their strategic restructuring resulted in losing their most important account. Not my problem anymore, but it was definitely Ashley's problem. And from what I heard through the grapevine, she wasn't handling it well. 6 months later, I'm running a consulting firm with 3 full-time employees and more federal contract work than I know what to do with. Turns out, when you build a reputation for actually understanding the technical side of things, people want to work with you. The Lander & Holt contract is just the beginning. Word spreads fast in federal contracting circles. Other companies started reaching out, asking if I could help them with their compliance issues, their environmental assessments, their regulatory problems. We heard what happened with Whitfield Industries, they'd say. We need someone who actually knows this stuff. So now I'm not just doing the work I used to do for one company. I'm doing similar work for 6 different companies at consulting rates that are about 4 times what my salary used to be. But let me tell you what happened to Ashley and her strategic restructuring. About 2 months after I left, I ran into Patricia Moore, the HR manager who had to sit through my firing, at a coffee shop downtown. She looked a lot more relaxed than the last time I saw her. "Wade," she said, "how are you doing? Can't complain. Business is good. What about you?" Patricia got this look on her face. Well, let's just say there have been some additional strategic changes at Whitfield Industries. Turns out Ashley's brilliant cost-cutting measure didn't stop with firing me. She decided to optimize a few other senior positions, pushed out the head of operations, restructured the engineering department, consolidated the project management team. Problem was, those people also had client relationships. And when you're dealing with federal contracts, those relationships aren't just nice to have, they're required to have. We lost 3 more major accounts, Patricia said. Ashley kept insisting it was just a coincidence, but the board finally saw the pattern. What kind of pattern? Every time she optimized someone's position, we lost the clients that person was working with. Turned out there were continuity clauses and personnel requirements in a lot more contracts than anyone realized. Ashley had been so focused on looking like a decisive executive that she never bothered to understand what the people she was firing actually did. She thought account management was just schmoozing and paperwork. Didn't realize that federal work requires specific technical knowledge, security clearances, and years of relationship building. You can't just hand a nuclear compliance file to some recent college graduate and expect them to figure it out. You can't replace someone who spent a decade building trust with federal regulators with a consultant who's never worked government contracts. But Ashley didn't know that, and by the time she figured it out, it was too late. So what happened to her? I asked. Patricia smiled. Let's just say she's exploring new opportunities in the private sector. Corporate speak for she got fired. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ashley fired me for being too expensive and too specialized. Then she discovered that expensive, specialized people are expensive and specialized for a reason. Meanwhile, Bryce Whitfield was probably having some uncomfortable conversations with his board about why his daughter's cost-cutting initiative had cost them half their revenue. But here's the thing, I don't feel bad for Ashley. Not because I'm vindictive, but because actions have consequences. She made decisions without understanding what those decisions would actually cost. That's not my fault. That's just bad business. And I definitely don't feel bad for Bryce. He's the one who put his daughter in charge of operations she didn't understand. He's the one who prioritized family over competence. He's the CEO. The buck stops with him. As for me, I learned something valuable about the difference between being an employee and being a business owner. When you're an employee, someone else controls your income, your schedule, your job security. They can decide you're redundant or not aligned with strategic objectives, and there's not much you can do about it. But when you're a business owner, especially when you're really good at something that's hard to replace, you control the terms. Clients come to you because they need your expertise, not because some executive thinks you're the cheapest option. The federal contracting world is full of companies trying to cut costs by hiring cheaper people. What they usually discover is that cheaper people cost more in the long run. Because when you mess up a federal contract, the penalties aren't just financial, they're reputational. And reputation takes years to build, but only minutes to destroy. Ashley learned that lesson the hard way. So did Bryce. So did Whitfield Industries. Me? I already knew it. That's why I always read the contracts I sign. That's why I document everything. That's why I build real relationships instead of just managing accounts. The Navy taught me that preparation prevents problems. Corporate America taught me that most people don't prepare, which creates opportunities for people who do. So now when companies call me up with their compliance emergencies and their regulatory disasters, I quote them my consulting rates and explain that expertise costs money, but fixing mistakes costs a lot more money. Most of them pay the rates, because at the end of the day, they'd rather work with someone who knows what they're doing than someone who's willing to work cheap. That's the difference between being valuable and being expendable. Valuable people set their own terms. Expendable people accept whatever terms they're given. Ashley thought she was eliminating expensive, expendable employees. What she actually did was eliminate valuable, irreplaceable expertise. And when expertise walks out the door, clients usually follow. Now I get to do the work I'm good at. For clients who appreciate what I do at rates that reflect the value I provide. Ashley gets to update her LinkedIn profile and explain to job interviewers why her last strategic initiative cost her company $200 million in revenue. I know which position I'd rather be in. Look, if you're watching this and you're in your 50s, working for some company where they treat you like you're lucky to have a job, here's my advice. Document everything. Read every contract, and never forget that your experience has value. The moment someone tries to tell you you're too expensive or too set in your ways, start thinking about what you'd do if they weren't paying your salary anymore. Because these companies will replace you with someone younger and cheaper in a heartbeat, but they can't replace what you know, who you know, and what you've built. That's yours to keep no matter what happens. Don't let some executive with an MBA and no real-world experience convince you otherwise. You've earned your expertise. Make sure you get paid for it.